Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now, back to the show. Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers, because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems, because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, not part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have Wendie Trubow. She's an author of a book called Dirty Girl: Joint Pain, Chronic Fatigue, Hair Loss, Eczema, and Plain Old Smelly Gas. The formal title is Dirty Girl: Ditch the Toxins, Look Great, and Feel Freaking Amazing. She's also part of the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology. She's in a residency doing that. So lots to talk about. Wendie, thanks for coming.
Hey, my pleasure. Good to be here.
Yeah, tell me what interests you in the residency you're in, and maybe a little bit of background on yourself, and then I want to ask you about the book and again your residency as well.
Sure. I've been, just for the record, I've been out of residency for a long time.
Right. Okay.
No problem. No, I graduated in 2004, so a really long time.
Well, it's only been 19 years. Whoops.
Yeah, I mean, what's a few gray hairs between 19 years? But I did.
You're a fully fledged practicing doctor for quite a while.
Totally. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm on my second career and third career in medicine at this point. So, but I did originally choose it because I loved taking care of women and I loved doing all the varied things that we do as OBGYN. So surgery, delivering babies, office work, all of it was really appealing to me. I didn't want to be in the same place doing the same thing every day. And so I chose that, really not recognizing that I had terrible adrenals and terrible resilience. Like I'm what I call strong like mouse. So there's some people they can abuse themselves. They can stay up all night. They can drink alcohol, eat cruddy food, not exercise, and they are happy. They are fine. Me, if I do that, I'm a hot flippin' mess. And so I didn't know that when I went into OB. So that was a mismatch. And so about 5 years ago, I left.
I was literally talking to my wife about this over lunch. I said, there's people exactly like you described, but it's not going to last forever. And at some point, they're going to have some serious health crisis. So don't be jealous of them that they seem like they're able to do that stuff, because it affects everybody. No one escapes, to completely. So
yeah, if my 11-year-old asked me last night, was I glad that I had the physical issues I had? Like, had it made me a different person? And I said to her, I'm not glad. She's very deep. She's a really deep soul. And I said to her, I'm not glad that I have such sensitive celiac disease. I'm not psyched that it's difficult to eat out, but I am very grateful for the insight and the experiences that I've had, because when patients say to me, whatever, right? Like my gut's irritable, I have headaches, I have fatigue, my sex drive is terrible, I can't lose weight. I'm like, yeah, I've been there. I have eczema. I've been there, and I've gotten through it and I've gotten over it. So I have a lot of sense of like experience and compassion because I went through it too. And I know that they're going to get better. But yeah, it was such an interesting question that she asked me. So I don't rue it like, I wish I were. No, I'm really happy where I am. I would like to be less sensitive to gluten so that I could eat out more frequently. But on the other hand, that food's not so good for me. So I guess I'm kind of dodging a bullet.
Yeah. In a weird way, it's as they say, a blessing and a curse. It's definitely more towards the blessing side, the way you're handling it.
Totally.
So you're doing what, standard obstetric practice right now? Do you clinical work, or what are you doing?
No. So let's see. So back in 2000 and so I graduated residency in 2004. I did obstetrics and gynecology for 5 years, and that dovetailed with my husband opening up a functional medicine practice, which, if you've not heard of functional medicine is essentially a root cause analysis for your health. Instead of saying, oh, here's the symptom, let's find a medicine that will alleviate the symptom, functional medicine says, okay, you have a symptom, let's find the underlying cause and fix the cause. So, your hypertension is not because you're deficient in some type of beta blocker, or your headache is not a deficiency of Tylenol or Motrin, or so it's really looking for what's the root cause. So he opened that center in 2008. And in 2008, I had this epiphany like, oh, that's who I'm supposed to be. There's a lot of people who, if you leave women alone, babies kind of deliver themselves, right? Just stay out of the way and don't mess it up. And then there's a lot of people with great surgical hands. And there's not a lot of people who are looking how to have you be vital, vibrant, healthy, able and interested in intimacy till you're 100, and that every decade gets better than the one before. There's not a lot of people taking that approach. And so I left. It's a 3-month lead. So I gave notice in November and then left in February and went into functional medicine full-time and have pretty much never looked back. So that's what I've been doing for the past 14 years.
Yeah, but what's the focus of your functional medicine? It sounds like it's on women.
Yeah, it's women's health. It's women's health.
Okay.
I still only treat women, but it's women. It's functional medicine for women, and I also do some gynecology, although it's a lot more limited just because I focus more on functional medicine. But I don't do any surgery.
Well, right. Okay. What are some of the top issues that your clients wrestle with that you advise them on?
Yeah, I think it's humanity, right? So we're all stressed. We all work too much. We're fatigued. We don't sleep that well. A lot of people have bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, reflux, or GERD. A lot of people have headaches, seasonal allergies. So the things that people deal with on a regular basis are a lot of the things that I'm dealing with. And then I have this particular specialty in toxins because of my own experience with having crossed my own unknown line in the sand for what my body could tolerate, and had a toxic exposure and then got really sick.
Oh, what happened?
Well, I didn't know that I was already teetering on the edge, right? So ignorance is bliss, knowledge is power, pick where you stand. But in 2018, I noticed that my hair started to thin, and it was after I didn't make this connection at the time, but it was right after my neighbor took his post-war home down, and it literally, I live in Massachusetts. The homes are like on top of each other, and so when he took his home down, we got the dust, the lead dust that I didn't know about at the time, but we got exposure to that. My hair started falling out, and I didn't know what the cause was. I'm like, I don't have any idea. Fast forward to April of 2019, we went on this amazing vacation. We spent a week in France, and it was really dusty. I was like, what's going on here? Gosh, we're going to have to wash all of our shoes. It's that dusty. It's crazy dusty. And the month after I came home, my hair loss accelerated. Like I felt like I lost about half the hair on my head, and I gained about just under 10 pounds and had this rash on my face that I could not get rid of. And I'm, what is going on here? And because I have access to all this testing, you can order tests on yourself. So of course I think, what does every human think when they gain weight and lose hair? They think my thyroid is off. Okay.
Right.
So I checked my thyroid. It looked amazing. Never better. Okay. Then I was like, well, I'm 48, so I'll check my hormones, because maybe it's hormonal. And my hormones looked amazing. So then I checked my gut, because I'm a celiac and I had all this dysfunction, and my gut looks great. And now I'm really stumped. And I'm listening to the radio one day, and I hear that when Notre Dame burned, it released 500 tons of lead dust into the air. And I I looked at my husband and I was like, we were there the week after Notre Dame and we got that exposure. And I got sick right after we came back. So I did a lead test, and because I have all access to the testing, I had previously gotten a free test that I did. And, okay, doctors are bad patients. I blew off the results. I was like, well, it's a little bit over positive. We treat over 8, and my level for lead was 9. And I was like, oh man, I don't think that's a big, little did I know. So I ignored it when I got it. And then I get this information. I have these problems. Fast forward to doing the test. My lead level is now 12. And that got my attention, especially in light of how I felt and the things that were happening. So I started treating. And what I didn't know that I do now know is that when you start to open up the detox pathways, you start to be able to move more out of your body. So I did this treatment.
That could cause additional and sudden symptomology and problems.
Well, as long as you're binding these toxins, it shouldn't. But I figured, 1 round of treatment, I'll be done, easy peasy. So I do the treatment. First 6 weeks, I feel like I've been run over by a truck. The next 6 weeks, I feel amazing. And I looked at my husband, I said, picture me doing a hair flip. My toxins, I think, are gone. I've gotten rid of my metals, but I'll finish the program so I know what the patients go through. This is what I said to my husband, like the peak of arrogance. And I do my post-protocol test, and my metals way higher. And I was like, oh crap.
Well, was it a blood test or?
No, it's a urine test. It's a provoked urine test, because what happens with metals in particular, although all the toxins you do this, is it's really toxic. So you don't let it, your body doesn't let it just float around in your bloodstream. Your body looks at it and goes, okay, we're going to store you. So lead preferentially goes to the bones. The metals tend to get stored in the bones, the fat, the organs, the brain. And so as you ramp up detox, you start to pull it out. And then as you ramp up detox, you can actually see what's present. So the highest my lead went was about 24, and the highest my mercury went was 41, which are way positive.
Okay. So what happened then? You did the post-protocol, and what happened then?
Got the post-protocol and, had these elevated levels, and I was like, okay, well, we're doing this again. So it turns out I had a lot of metals, and I'm loyal to them. I have a hard time letting go of stuff. I have pretty crappy detox. I've tested my detox pathways, my methylation pathways genetically, and they stink. And so I have been working to get my metals down, and I've gotten the lead is now at therapeutic levels, which is great. But the mercury, I'm really struggling with. I had mercury fillings for well over 40 years. And every time, if you have a silver filling, they're 50% mercury by weight. And every time you eat or drink or chew gum or chew on something, suck on a candy, brush your teeth, you release more mercury into your system. And
I have one of those, but I've had it for 30-some years. I thought that it would have leached out by now. I was afraid to get it taken out. I didn't want it to be a sudden rush of more stuff, but I don't know what to do.
I know. Well, I had 3 left, and for many years I resisted it. I was like, what are they doing? They've been there for forever. What are they doing? And I had a consult with the Biologic dentist, and she said to me, look, it never stops off-gassing, ever. And, it's so toxic that when we take it out, we can't even just throw it in the trash. You can throw stuff in the trash if it's not, like, frankly bloody. But she said it's so toxic we have to have a special trash for it because it's toxic waste, truly toxic waste. And I was like, oh, crap, get them out. So with a note for the listeners, if you're going to get this taken out, definitely do it with a biologic dentist. Do not go to the person who put it in. Go to someone who specializes in protecting you from the release of mercury that happens when you pull it out. Any good dentist who does this will give you binders. They'll recommend that you take charcoal. They'll have you taking chlorella, and they'll give you oxygen to compete. They'll drape you. They'll drape themselves. Like a good dentist is or a biologic dentist will take it out. And so it is better for you long-term to take it out.
So you have to do all that really to do it right?
Yep. Because otherwise you're just getting a big fat exposure to mercury, which it's the upside is you'll no longer have the filling, but the downside is you're getting a big fat exposure when you take it out. So yeah, definitely be careful when you take it out. Don't just go to the dentist, because especially if you're teetering on the edge like I was, it will make you very sick. And I have to say, I really took precautions when I got mine taken out. And I took an extra binder that day. I fasted. I took fiber. I took extra charcoal. I did chlorella. I mean, I did like a ton. I came and got an IV to bind the metals. I really did a lot of stuff, and I was still really sick. But here's what's really cool. I wear a Whoop to track my recovery and my sleep and my performance. And my recovery meaning heart rate variability and recovery from stressors, it was terrible for the next like 2 days. But after that, my recovery jumped up significantly. And I kind of thought to myself, oh, well, maybe it's just placebo, right? You get them taken out and you think, oh, well, I spent all this money, so it was a good thing. But my recovery, the heart rate variability, my body's ability to recover increased. And you can't fool the Whoop. You can't placebo the Whoop. You know, it's data. It's not for you.
What did you feel for the first 2 days, and then what happened?
The first day and the next day, and a little bit the third day, I felt really like just fatigued and logy and kind of like, oh, but I slept and it didn't help. I had it done on a Friday and I didn't work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. By Monday, I was ready to go back to work. But the whole weekend, I was like, God, I really didn't feel well. And you know, part of it, I still have high levels. So if you get your levels down and I did it in the middle of a detox, but if you can get your levels down and then have it removed, you shouldn't respond the way I did. But I still had pretty high levels when I had them taken out. It was about a year ago.
Well, why now that it's out, you still high levels? How come you can't get rid of the mercury?
Well, think about it. It gets stored, so you have to pull it out, A. And B, you think about 40 years of exposure. And so there's a lot that goes into the truth. So one is just the sheer amount of exposure that we've had. You know, you and I have had a lot of exposure, so that you keep storing that in your body. That's one. And the other is that detox isn't occurring in the absence of all other stressors. So yeah, I mean, if I lived in a pristine place and had more money than God and had a chef who prepared all organic, locally sourced food and lived in a house that never had any off-gassing and had pristine air quality and water quality, and all of my children were perfect angels and perfectly healthy, then maybe the detox would go a little bit faster. But we live in this earth, and I travel, so I get exposed to fumes on the plane, and I live on the earth. So anytime you buy a piece of furniture or a car or a bed, you get toxins that you get exposed to. So that think of it two ways: death by 1,000 cuts, or standing under this waterfall of exposure. And so when you do these detoxes, you're going to pull out all the other stuff too. So it's not like you can time and date stamp it saying, okay, really only do the mercury. No, there are certainly things that preferentially treat mercury, but detox in general is going to improve everything. And there's only so much your body can, so you can't do everything.
So how long do you think it'll take you to fully detox?
You know, every round, hope springs eternal. Every round I do it, I'm like, okay, this is the one, right? This is the one. I suspect it'll be another year. I suspect. I'm not 100% sure. What I'm really working on, it's so easy to get pulled away and get busy. So I'm really working on making sure that I get an IV every week that preferentially binds to mercury so that I can preferentially pull it out. And by the way, every time I get an IV, my recovery shoots up too. So there's something too that my body likes the detox. And
your recovery shoots up. What do you feel?
I just feel, and like the next day I'm super energetic and my recovery is like, 80s, 90s. My recovery's in the bright green. It's never yellow or red the next day. It's like my body is like, yay, thank you. Do it again, right? So I would say I think it's probably another year. I mean, we'll see. I work really hard on detox, and even once I'm quote unquote done, I'm probably still going to do some level of detox because, again, I have the worst genetics, and that plays a role. That plus the stress of my life plays a big role.
Okay, I understand. So, you said your lead is down to therapeutic levels. What does that mean? It makes it sound like lead is a therapy, but I know it's not.
Yeah, no, sorry. Let me clarify that. So we treat lead and mercury when they show up in the urine over a level of 8. And my lead has been under 8 for a couple of rounds. So lead is no longer, quote unquote, an issue. It's just the mercury.
Okay, I got you. So in your patients, do you see lead very commonly or mercury very commonly, or what? You said you're a toxin specialist, so what kind of toxins do you see? Do you see like glyphosate? I mean, what?
Yeah, I mean, so in our practice, so just to back up one sec, Richard, I promise to answer that, but let me just set the stage because you have to address someone's foundations of their health. And what I mean by that is if you try to remove toxins from someone who has untreated gut dysfunction, severe adrenal fatigue, terrible nutrient status, they're going to feel awful all the time, and you're going to make them worse, and it's going to be ineffective. So the first step of doing someone's detox is actually normalizing their gut, their sleep, their thought patterns, their exercise, their adrenals, their energy. It's the foundations of it. So you can't go right into detox because you make people worse, and then they're mad at you, which is never good, right? You want to be in partnership. So step one,
they're more likely to give up too.
Yes, totally. Totally, because they're like, oh my God, this is terrible. I hate that doctor. She made me sick. Okay, well, fine. We won't do that, right? So you have to make people baseline feel better. And then in our practice, we have a couple of different ways people can do this. We have a brick and mortar. It's local. You have to come meet us. And that's a small group of the population. And then we have an online ability to do that also. So we have two companies essentially. So you can come in person or you can do it online. The in-person is much more extensive, also much more expensive. So the in-person looks at heavy metals. It looks at mycotoxins, which are the toxins mold puts out in your body when you've been exposed and it's hanging out in you. It's very creepy. We look at environmental toxins like plastics, phthalates, nail polish fumes, gasoline fumes, flame retardants, styrene. We look at all of that. It's a huge, huge test. And then we also look at herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, and that's where the glyphosate comes in. So it's essentially 4 distinct tests that we're looking at to determine what are you high in, what are your risks. And that's actually why we wrote the book Dirty Girl, because I had actually done my mycotoxins, remember, mold testing, right before we went on this trip in 2019. But I hadn't gotten started on the results, but I had 5 different strains of mycotoxins from various mold exposures that I wasn't aware of at the time. And then I got this metals information and I was like, well, I might as well test for environmental toxicants, that other group, and then the herbicides and pesticides. And I came up with like a whole list of environmental toxicants. And I looked at my husband, I was like, I'm such a dirty girl. And then I said, and that's the book we're writing. Because if I'm like the poster child for healthy living, I've been gluten-free for, I don't even know, 17 years. I don't eat processed carbs. I don't eat sugar. I don't drink alcohol. We eat super healthy. I love what I do. I have a great life. And I have all these talks. What are people who may not be as fortunate or as focused on it as I am? What do they have? So we wrote this book. That's why we wrote it.
Where is in person, by the way? And virtual consult, is it US or Europe or world or?
Yeah, great.
People come.
Thank you. Okay, so our practice, our bricks and mortar practice is currently in Massachusetts, and we are working on setting one up, a virtual practice in Florida, which people would be able to access. We're a little bit of ways from it. We're probably about a year from that. So the brick and mortar practice is in Florida. So that's through our practice called 5 Journeys. And then our online is Dirty Girl Detox. And through Dirty Girl Detox, we have an ability to test. It is currently in the United States. So we can't ship internationally yet. It's in the United States. So when we test people remotely, when they join part of the Dirty Girl program, it's all remote. So you can participate in programs. We have a Feel Freaking Amazing program. It's an 8-week transform your life, figure out what foods are messing you up. We have the ability to look at everything.
Okay, so your expensive program is an 8-week program.
So that's
not the virtual one, but the in-office is you need to set the whole bunch of testing.
No, so I haven't been clear. So you can come to the practice and you can do the full testing, head to toe. And then we have also the online program, which is the testing for some environmental toxicants, as well as online program that you can work on. That's the 8-week program. That's all online.
Oh, okay. Why can't you get all the testing done, not being local to you? If someone wants to be really expensive, can they do that?
Yes, mostly, sort of. So Massachusetts state law requires that if you're not in Massachusetts, you establish care face-to-face. So that's the wrinkle, because that's a medical service, right? Like that's medical. And then the all online stuff is technically wellness based.
Well, could I come for a first consult?
Yep.
Meet me at the airport. Hey, how you doing? I get a picture, and then from then on, you can help me virtually, or
yes, yeah, we could totally do.
The whole time to do the testing too.
No, it's just literally a one visit in person so that we see face to face, we establish care, and then you can be wherever you are for your other visits. But the first visit, just per Massachusetts state law, has to be in person if you're not a Massachusetts resident. So it's a little confused. But yeah, after that, you don't have to be in person. But the reason you have to establish care as a medical patient is like, I can't prescribe you medication to provoke your metals if you're not a patient. Like that's practicing medicine on someone who's not a patient. That's not right. So I do need people to establish care, and then we can test their metals in a provoked fashion. Because remember, if you just pee in a cup and send it off, that's called a baseline or an unprovoked test. That won't show what you really have. That's only showing what you're voluntarily getting rid of, or if you had a massive exposure.
Well, wouldn't it be a clue if you have high levels of X, Y, or Z in your urine?
It would, but
signal that you have really high levels in your body?
It only shows up positive. Like the kids in Flint, Michigan, if you do a test on them, they're going to be positive in their urine on an unprovoked test. But the people like you and me, we're not getting. So let's think about this. If you tested right after you got your mercury filling taken out, within a week, you'd probably come as positive. You'd show up positive, but it doesn't tell you what's being stored in the body. And what you really want to get to is what's hanging out in there. And the baseline test doesn't tell you that. Almost everyone's negative for that test because the body sequesters it. You don't have that out. You put that away. It's toxic.
Okay, I understand. So you need to do the Provoked test.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. You're also evaluating their metabolic pathways, their ability to clear toxins. Mm-hmm. So someone that has good pathways, will they just never have the problem in the first place? They don't need you? Or do people still have different levels of it, and that'll determine how long the treatment is, how many courses and over how long?
Yeah, everyone's got something. It's really impossible to be alive in this universe. Now, some people have not so much, but everyone's got something. And I think the question is, eventually it's going to catch up to you. So this comes down to, what's your philosophy of life? Are you interested in waiting until you have a problem? In which case, if you're strong like a bull, you don't need, you can just wait and hang out.
No, what I mean is, if I come to you and I have, let's say, high levels of, mercury, and I have really crappy detox pathways, versus someone else comes to you, they also have high levels of mercury, but their detox pathways are pretty good.
They're going to go faster than you.
Well, so they'll just go faster. So the treatment for the slow burner is just longer and more extensive, but that's the reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because your body's just like fighting it.
Okay. All right, I see what you mean. So again, what are the most common toxins that you see women have? Again, is glyphosate one of them, or is it mercury, or what are maybe the top 3 or 5? And I know everyone's different, but are there symptoms that are associated with one or the other that are distinct?
No. Yes and no. So how you will respond to your toxic burden is dependent on your body's predispositions and the pathways that it tends to go down. So not everyone's going to respond the same way. Having said that, there are some diagnoses that will cue you to, something's going on. So an easy low-hanging fruit one is osteoporosis. If anyone has osteoporosis, there's basically 2 causes. Aside from nutritional deficiency and age, let's set those to the side. There are 2 things that really promote osteoporosis. One is lead preferentially hangs out in the bone. So if you have osteoporosis, I'm very suspicious that you have lead. And the other is celiac disease, because when you have celiac disease, you don't absorb your minerals and nutrients. So you become severely nutrient deficient. So that's less common, I think, than having lead, because we all grew up with lead in the pipes. I was just hearing that schools are working on getting lead out of the pipes in the drinking water in the school. And you've got to be kidding me.
Don't worry, they'll do it by 2080. I'm sure that makes some headway. I
was like, wait, how do we still have lead in the pipes in schools? Okay.
Well, he was in an article I just saw. This may be of interest to you and listeners. They were talking about artificial turf and how a lot of schools are using that, and it has a lot of PFAS, forever polyfluorinated chemicals in it, and it's making people real sick. So surprise, surprise, they're switching back to grass, hopefully. Yeah. But it's just yet another source of this garbage.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, the other issue is that humans like beautiful things. Now, that's not a problem, but when the beautiful thing transmits into, we want a beautiful yard, and we don't want a multi-faceted green grass. We want one grass, like there's one grass that we want. Nature doesn't like monoculture. Nature likes diversity. So when you try to have a monoculture yard, nature's going to be like, no, I don't think so. And you'll be like, wait, why do I have weeds? And why do I have these other crabgrasses? And why do I have these other things? So humans will spray chemicals. So, especially that's why it's so harmful to, hang out on a golf course, because they spray to get that monoculture. That's the way they get the grass to look the way it looks. They spray the living daylights of it. So it's bad for you.
Another functional guy I know that unfortunately passed away, his wife was a big golfer, and they tested her, and she had, 10 or 100 times the level of certain chemicals that come from the golf course in her, because she was there so often. So,
Yeah. So the glyphosate, it's funny, I have a family member who just bought a house on a golf course and called me. He was like, Wendie, I bought a house. And I'm like, oh, cool. Where? And they're like, on a golf course. I'm like, no. And then, of course, I couldn't say anything because they already bought the house. I'm not going to say something. But it's very toxic for you because they spray to get that monoculture. So when you live in that house, you're getting all of the chemicals. It does aerosolize and it does get airborne, and you do get exposed. So golf courses are massive sources, and so are farms. If you live near a farm, that's another source that you're going to get glyphosate. So you had asked, what are the common things? You asked me a really nuanced question, like what are the common toxins, and then what are the symptoms? So I started by answering, okay, osteoporosis is one. I have hearing loss. That's a sign of mercury toxicity, actually, and I didn't know until after the hearing loss, right? Like, who knew? I never knew. But hearing loss is a sign of mercury toxicity.
You make a bad joke. You say, I haven't heard anything about this.
I haven't heard anything about that. Now when I'm irked at my family, I just take my hearing aids out. I'm like, I don't want to listen. I mean, I can hear without them, but it's just muted. So that's one. But then there's other stuff like hair loss. There's so many causes for hair loss, but heavy metals are absolutely one. Mercury in particular will cause hair loss. And Alzheimer's, dementia can be tracked back to toxins, although that's much more complex. There's multiple pathways you need to be evaluated for to look at that. But there's a lot of things. So I would say the most common toxins when we're looking at metals, it's lead and mercury. When we're looking at, a lot of people are high for flame retardants because a lot of beds have flame retardants in them. And so people sleep on their bed, 8 hours a night, and they get glyphosate's very common. Plastics are almost universal. Gasoline fumes are pretty high. I had a patient who had the highest gasoline fume levels I've ever seen. Because she didn't even leave her house. And I was like, okay, do you live near an airport? Do you live in the flight path of airplanes? She goes, yeah, actually, the flights, when they land, it sounds like they're landing on our house. I'm like, bingo. Because, they're off-gassing as they're landing.
So I guess if you live near a major road, or,
yep.
I don't know.
The air quality within a half mile of a major road significantly increases your risk for respiratory disorders, chronic diseases because of the pollutants. And, especially as the tires drive on the highway, they
Wait, did you say a half?
Within a half mile, yeah.
Well, cities are so dense that you're always within a half mile. You're within 100 feet, a couple 100 feet of a major road.
So within a half mile of a highway, right? So if you think of a major road, but then also if you're living near a commonly traveled road, the tires as they drive on the road, they degrade, but it's not visible. It's not like you can go, oh, here's a piece of plastic. It's micro particles, and those are aerosolized to breathe those. So this comes down to you don't want to filter your air, especially if you live near one of those sources.
You mean you do want to filter your air, or you don't want to filter your air?
You do. You definitely do, because you're going to want to filter out those particles, the pollutants. I always say to people, do your best with the budget you have. So if you can get a tiny little air filter, cool, bring it from room to room with you and filter the air for the room you're in. If you can do a higher quality, cool, get a room, every room get its own HEPA filter so that you're filtering out all those particles. And if you can filter for mold too, that's even better. And then if you really can, get a whole house filter, because you're going to want to filter out all the particulates and everything. That's fantastic. Do the best you can with what you have. So pick what you do based on your budget.
Well, you talked about symptoms of mercury and lead overexposure, but what about glyphosate? Is it different than those two, or same?
Yeah, glyphosate's a very interesting one, because glyphosate, it is a cancer, looks like it's a cancer promoting agent specifically for liver lymphomas. However, glyphosate is not, except for the cancer thing, right? Let's set that to the side. Except for that, glyphosate is not directly harmful to our microbiome. Microbiome is the balance of bacteria and biota in our gut. It's not directly, it doesn't harm us. However, it does directly impact the bugs that live in our gut, our microbiome. And so what's happening is, it's really interesting. It doesn't impact Salmonella, Shigella. It doesn't impact the bad bacteria. They do not have this pathway. It's called the Shikimate pathway. And glyphosate interrupts their ability to make amino acids, which they're going to then use as the building blocks. So bacteria that rely on that pathway, glyphosate interrupts that path. And guess what? A ton of the good bacteria in our gut rely on that pathway. So it's not directly impacting us, it's impacting the bacteria that live in us, and that alters the gut microbiome, and that impacts us because...
But think about this. So let's say I have glyphosate exposure and mercury and lead, you said earlier you don't want to treat someone that has dysbiosis for lead and mercury. So glyphosate, it sounds like, has to come first in terms of detox to even allow you to be able to detox from some of this other stuff. Is that
right?
correct?
I mean, a huge part of our treatment is let's fix your gut. We do stool testing on people in the bricks and mortar, the practice. We're doing stool testing to look at what is the biotic balance, what is the digestion, is there inflammation, is there infection, is there overgrowth, like what is going on in there? And we are fixing that. And as part of that, we look at food sensitivities. And a lot of people wind up on, we're saying to them, okay, wherever you are, level up. Meaning you don't have to be perfect, but you have to make an improvement in your food and your intake and your stress, because it's like death by 1,000 cuts. But if you take away 100 of them, it will be impact. So glyphosate is pretty water soluble. It's readily excreted. That's the nice thing about glyphosate. I don't have a lot of nice things to say about glyphosate, but it is readily excreted. If you stop filling up the pump with glyphosate, you're going to be able to move it. So leveling up with organic, minimally processed. I mean, think about any non-organic grain. So think about your bread, your pasta, your cake, candy, cookie, all of that, it has glyphosate in it. So if you eat bread 3 times a day, you're getting a glyphosate. So there's a lot of easy ways to level up. Oats are almost universally contaminated, especially if they're not organic. Chickpeas, legumes, wine. California's dirty little secret, which is wine is extremely dirty unless it's organic. So you're going to want to basically try to eat organic so that you're not nailing your microbiome and getting exposed to more toxins at the same time. Do your best, though.
So, but is there an order to your treatment depending on what's going on with a person, or does it not matter as much?
Oh, well, the order is really get the foundations managed and then deal with the toxins. And when you deal with the toxins, the order doesn't really matter. And what I talk about with people is that the treatments do synergize. So one treatment will help the other treatment, and the other treatment will help the third treatment. Like they all help each other, which is good. But sometimes that's overwhelming. Think about the treatment for the mycotoxin is binders 1 to 2 times a day, ideally 3 times a day, but I don't know anyone who could do 3 times a day, especially because you can't eat around it. It's painful. So I say to people, this is a slog. This is a marathon. Go for once a day. And if you do once a day, every day, you're an A+. If you do it 5 days a week, that's an A. Good. Because it's a slog. But then the metals is like a bunch of different binders and replacement and minerals throughout the day. So it's a real pain in the butt. So people have a hard time doing all of these treatments at once because it's too much. So I'm like, just do what you can do.
Well, what's it like to have a binder? What do you have to do? And what is it? How does it make people feel? Like, what is it? Is it a pill? Is it like a whole bunch of powder you got to swallow? Like,
you have a bunch of options. So, I mean, the simplest binder is fiber. Fiber is fantastic for the gut. We use one called propylman, it's called Lean and Clean. It's the konjac propylman fiber. And it binds to all the strains of mycotoxins, and it also helps clean up the gut from toxins, and it's a binder. So that's easy. That'll just help you be more regular. You probably won't really notice much when you take that, except like, oh, you're pooping regularly, which you should be. You should be pooping every day, if not more. So that's one type. Another type is it's a powder that's derived from a silica gel, and that's a great binder. But sometimes, every once in a while, someone will have like gut irritability from it, won't like it. Then you can do binders like I do medicinal DMSA, which binds to lead and mercury as a provoking, it's a chelating. But then even simple things like these aren't binders, but you can displace heavy metals by increasing your minerals. So zinc, if people are zinc deficient, they're going to have a hard time dealing with detox. The zinc is going to displace the metals and push them out of it. So there's a lot of ways you can, but it does tend to get a little bit, I'd say pick the biggest problem and deal with that first. Don't try to build everything. It gets to be a lot.
So when someone comes to you, obviously they don't come to you for minor problems. They're probably, having a seriously bad time. Should they expect that really it takes like a 1-year commitment to see very significant results? Or is there a general thing that you can tell people that come to you to get them to be patient enough to help?
I love that question, actually. So I think it's a gradient. So if you're sick, you're likely sick. I say to people, this is 18 to 24. But if you're what I'll call walking well, and that's the majority of our practice, like you get through your day, you hold down your job, but you get through your day and hold down your job in a way that you feel could be better. You feel your energy could be better. Your sleep could be better. Your sex drive could be better. You could lose 5 to 10 pounds. Like you're fine, but you're not great and you want to be great. That's anywhere from 3 to 12 months, depending on what's going on and how able you are to make the changes. I think for women in particular, we're the architects of our own suffering because we try to do too much. And then we're like, why am I suffering? And that's really hard to. But if you're sick because you're not eating well, then I can fix that pretty easily because you're going to see the impact within 6 to 12 weeks. And you're like, oh my gosh, wow, I feel great. And when you feel great, you're motivated to keep it up. So that's a huge motivator, especially if you were uncomfortable when you didn't feel. Avoiding that is really, people are motivated.
What about women that are holding on to weight? They swear up and down they're eating really well, but yet they just can't lose, so what causes that?
Toxin. Because if you can't get rid of your toxins, they are stored in your fat, bones, and organs. And the body knows that if you get rid of too much fat, you're going to have this influx of toxins that you can't deal with. That's why they wound up there in the first place. You couldn't deal with them. So you stored them. Think of your fat as a storage depot. So you have things in your storage depot that are unpleasant, unsightly, and downright harmful. But you can't deal with it because your liver's not optimized, your gut's not optimized, your adrenals are a mess. Once you deal with, I call that the trifecta. You deal with the trifecta of your health, and then you're much, much better suited to start pulling the toxins out and then lose the weight. Step 1.
Okay. Well, I guess we're just about out of time. We've gone through a lot of great concepts. For people listening, women, obviously, that need this help, how do they get in contact with your office, for either in-person, come visit you, or virtual? What's the details?
Sure. Just for the record, our practice sees men. I just don't. So we have other providers in the practice who will see men. So it's not only women. It's absolutely both genders. We won't discriminate against your gender. You can come in whatever gender you are. We don't care. Okay. So our practice is 5 journeys. That's the brick and mortar. And then our online programs, detox-oriented work, nutrition stuff, Feel Freaking Amazing program, that's at dirtygirldetox.com. So that's how people can get into working with us as in a wellness capacity, not medical.
And would you recommend that people read your book first?
Totally.
Prepare themselves mentally and maybe take a few initial steps to help themselves before they even get to you?
I think everyone should read the book because we wrote it so that you'd have a roadmap to figure out what's going on and how do I fix it. And so there's tons of things that you can do on your own that you don't need to pay me to tell you to do. So, buy the book. That'll tell you to do it. And that you can get on Amazon. That's super easy. So there's a lot of stuff that you could do to start working on your health and transform your experience of daily life without coming to me. There's tons of stuff. So yeah, the book will talk about how to get started. And it feels like a lot, and it is a lot. So that's why Rome wasn't built in a day. You will not do the whole book in a weekend, right? Don't try to be like, I'm going to power through. No, take it slow.
Okay, well, very good. Wendie, it's been a really great call. I'm glad you do what you do, and it sounds like you're able to help a lot of people. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Richard, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.